Coming up now on 7-Eleven, everyone is in their places with their bright, shiny faces. Right? Yeah, look, everybody.
Yeah.
Okay, but Warren, now he's smiling. Now Warren is smiling. All right, full disclosure, before we start the program, just want you guys to know there is some smoked cheese here made by one Stafford Barnett. And let me just tell you guys, yesterday we remembered, look, the deadline's up. We waited a week, as was suggested for the aging process. Rob and I... You can see there's half a block there, and that's all I'm going to say about the half a block part. But feel free to partake.
Well, I will say it was even marked on Rob's calendar in his office. With Cheese Day, Smoked Cheese Day is coming up, and we were all the whole KPEL staff was told about it, so we're on track.
It's really good.
It is good.
I have to give it a shot.
You really need to brag on yourself, and I know you don't do this except for your family and your friends.
Yeah,
but it's good stuff.
It's their Christmas gifts this year. It's going to be like.
Can I be one of your kids?
My kids aren't going to get cheese. They get cheese and jerky year round.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But the rest of the family is getting cheese and jerky.
Could you pretend to be my friend?
Yes. We could figure that out.
Okay, all right.
Maybe a little basket.
Okay, all right.
A really, really little basket.
I love you, Stafford. So funny. All right, so we're going to start with our first topic. Derek's going to give our topic, and we'll start with Stafford this morning and work our way around the room.
So we're talking this morning, our first topic for Winging It Wednesday today is about tax talks and Trump. We're hearing and seeing more tweets from Trump aimed at Tennessee Senator Bob Corker in this fight, but he's talking about tax meetings with Mitch McConnell. Where do we stand as far as Trump's tax plan, the Republican tax plan that's coming out of the House and the Senate? They're battling it out to see which details are going to fit in. What do you think, Stafford? Where should we go in this direction?
I said it last week, and I say it again. I don't see it making it out of committee. The Corker has come out and said, "Hey," and the whole fight started because Corker said, "If it adds any money to the deficit, we're not going to do it." And so everybody's tried to get a little creative about where they can increase their revenues without calling it a tax increase to offset the decrease in revenues that Trump's tax cuts will bring. There's some real problems that Trump's tax increases or decreases that he's trying to address. One of which is $2.5 trillion. I think it's $2.5 trillion that are sitting offshore that hasn't been brought back into our economy because the corporate tax rate is 35%. So there are real issues they're trying to address here. The problem is the plan will reduce federal revenues by $9.5 trillion. And unless that's accompanied with a very large spending cut, it would increase the national debt to nearly 80% of GDP by 2036. Also, ending the inheritance tax affects 2 out of every 1,000 people, so 0.2%. And so that part of the tax literally is a tax reduction only to the wealthiest of the wealthy. So if you have an estate over $5 million, you're going to pay roughly 10% of that. I don't know if it's a sliding scale as it goes up, but the people who are going to have to make up the payments for that are the middle class. So taxes will go up on the middle class to cover the difference of money that we just gave away to the rich.
Warren, what do you think on it?
First of all, that the deficit is going to go up. It keeps climbing. That I go back to what John Kennedy said one time, and it is one of the paradoxical truths that lower tax rates means higher revenues coming into the government. We heard this over and over and over about the Reagan tax cuts and how it increased the deficit and on and on and on, which is absolutely not so. Those tax cuts, the revenue to the government more than doubled in that 8 years. And that under the agreement that he had made with Tip O'Neill and the Democrats, that they were supposed to start cutting spending like $1 for every 2 new dollars that comes into the government. In other words, there was a marginal decrease in spending, but you had more money to spend. And so what happens, they did not do it. Of course, the president has nothing to say about spending. It's all done by Congress. That's by Constitution. And, I still go back and say that we need to totally reform the tax code and get rid of the income tax on both personal and corporate. And as far as the money offshore and all that, we've had $5 trillion that's flown into the stock market. this year alone, $5 trillion, and that did not come from quantitative easing. You know, it is money that people have put in there that they believe in. So tax cuts going to add to the deficit. I think that I just totally disagree with that. Like I disagree with just about every damn thing that Bob Corker has to say. Bob Corker is now making Jim Sasser look like a good Tennessean.
And that's saying something, huh, Warren?
That's saying something. As a Tennessean, that's saying something.
Well, there are the Democrats and those who don't want to see Trump succeed will always put the most negative spin on it. But there have been multiple studies, and we've had historical precedents for it, as Warren partially mentioned. I mean, under JFK and under Reagan, that taxes were cut. When people, start screaming about, oh, Reagan raised taxes, no, he closed the loopholes, which is exactly what Trump is trying to do here. The corporate loopholes that wealthy corporations, large corporations can take advantage of, but the small to mid-sized business owner simply has no opportunity to do that. Also, they don't look at, as the Boston Economist, the study that I read, they don't look at the kind of dynamic scoring that happens when you have the tax cuts. You put the money into the pockets of the business owners who can expand, who can provide more jobs. And so there's no dynamic scoring to this. There's some really attractive parts of this. It's the closest thing to the Reagan tax proposal that I've seen. I mean, doing away with the death tax for anybody is a good thing. It's bad public policy. The alternative minimum tax was, thought they were going to get 100 to 128 taxpayers to finally pay taxes. And what did it do? It wasn't indexed for inflation. It wasn't, bracket. The bracket creep was horrible. Middle class people are having to pay this. It's a terrible thing. They're still keeping the mortgage interest deduction and the charitable deduction. Those are two things we want to encourage, home ownership and giving to charities. I think there are a lot of good things in here. The devil's in the details. They're going to have to negotiate all of this. But as a framework, I think this is a good framework. And I tell you that they're saying right now about $4 trillion sitting overseas that could be repatriated and really do a lot of good in this country.
All right, one telephone call, and then we'll have to take our first break. Hi, you're on Winging It Wednesday. Please go ahead with your question or comment.
Yeah, I just listen to the liberal Democratic talking points that your other guest there has about when you cut taxes to increase the revenues to the country. I mean, it doesn't have to be neutral. I didn't hear Democrat one talk about the deficit, except Obama when he was running, and after he got in, he doubled the deficit. But the big point is we need to leave the people. Not you're just shifting around where you're going to spend the money. And one big thing I think we ought to do away. And I pay a lot of state income tax. I think we ought to do away with the deduction. And they're going to offset that by giving individual added individual credits. But the states like California and New York that tax and Louisiana, they raise the state income tax on us, and they say, hey, it's no big deal. We're going to offset that, but you're going to get to deduct it from your federal taxes. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I think at least we're heading in a right direction, and there's some common sense in Washington, and they hadn't been in a long time under both parties, by the way.
All right. Thank you very much, caller, for your comments. Any quick 10, 20-second thoughts? Okay. Stafford, are you interested in giving your political party or your affiliation?
I've been a registered independent for, probably 6 years now. I think if you go pull my records. And again, I would like for us to see smart tax reform at the federal level and more importantly at the state level. But we've seen a shift in the party that has gone from a party of principle on the Republican side to the party of Trump. And that's why you see guys like Bob Corker and John McCain and Jeff Flake changing the way that they're doing, changing what they're doing, and turning on them. And so there's not a lot of common sense. There's a lot of platitudes. And until and you hear it. You hear it in people's recreational anger every day.
All right, 30 seconds.
Recreational
30
anger.
Seconds.
Now, there's a
thing.
We've gone from a party of principles. That's what this election was all about, Mr. Stafford. I hate to tell you that, but the people have said they have had enough. They have had enough with us now becoming $100 trillion in debt. What this country owes is $100 trillion in debt that we have to pay. When you take everything into consideration. And none of that group up there has tried to address any of it. And so that's why the American people turn around and voted for somebody else, and that's why there's an awful lot of support out there for the man that you despise.
All right.
And that's why those people that you love are leaving.
All right, let's talk real quick because what did y'all think of Flake and his comments and Bob Corker? We're going to get 60 seconds on that, and then we have to go to our break. I'm going to start with Warren on this one. What do you think about Bob Corker and Jeff? Is it Jeff Flake? Why am I having a Flake moment?
It's Jeff Flake.
Yeah,
Jeff
okay, because I'm a Flake. Sorry about that. Your thoughts on all these comments, sir, and his farting comments?
Flake's name suits him, and he's been one of those people, kind of like John McCain, that he thinks that he can jump up and go against the tide occasionally, and this, that, and other, make a name for himself and be a good standout out there. And the people of Arizona have sent him a good message that you're going down this election. He knows it, so he's leaving. Bob Corker is about the same way. Bob Corker is an empty suit. He never would have gotten elected if Harold Ford Jr. had run as a Republican. Bob Corker would have never seen the light of day in the U.S. Senate. But since Harold Ford Jr. ran as a Democrat, Corker barely won that election 12 years ago. And so he's tried to go in there, and he's gotten to the point where he thinks he's somebody, and that he sat there and come out with some of the most idiotic things about the wars in Iraq and all this, that, and other. And he's got the gall to sit there and talk about Trump not speaking, not being truthful, and this, that, and other. Corker needs to go, and by God, take Lamar Alexander with you.
All right, Carol, 60 seconds on this one.
Okay, well, how do I pass that? Everybody was putting down on Trump. How stupid is he for going against Bob Corker when this guy sits on an important committee and he's going to need his vote and blah, blah, blah. Trump, above all, can read the poll numbers, as could Bob Corker, which is why he decided not to run. His poll numbers in Tennessee are dismal. When even Marsha Blackburn gets out there and starts, who is, she's never been known as a real rabble-rouser, and she says, well, the Senate needs to get their job done. That tells me she's running and she knows she's got a real opening, because Bob Corker, his poll numbers were in the tank with Republican GOP voters. They asked them, are you happy with the way he's been against Trump? 70% were very unhappy with him, and those are primary voters. So he knew he didn't have a chance, and he got out. And I defer to what Warren said. He knows a little more about Bob Corker than I do, but he's really just like all those other strutting peacocks up there.
All right, Stafford, your turn, sir. When
the news broke of what Jeff Flake said last night, I turned to my wife and I said, "Just wait for tomorrow morning. He's going to get attacked on the radio show." It's unfortunate. It's predictable. So in my age group, guys who grew up my age and who are traditionally Republicans felt like the party left them a long, long time ago, and has stopped catering to the 40 and under people who care about some different things than the older generation does. And unfortunately, Warren's got some really bad numbers about $100 trillion in debt. But let's be clear. It wasn't my generation that voted for the politicians that put us there, and it wasn't the generations under us, and it's going to be the generations under us that are going to have to pay for that. And so, hey, Warren,
that.
Okay, hold on.
So when I sit back and I see people with integrity, war heroes, sit up and say, and reach out to people like me and say, hey guys, we don't like what's going on. We feel that we should act a little more maturely at the federal level. And we're going to stand up. And when the guy sits there with damn near in tears and goes, I have to answer to my children and grandchildren, it strikes a chord with me, and I agree with him.
Okay, Warren, real quick, you got 30 seconds.
Stafford, look, I know I'm older than you, but let me tell you something. What you just said is what the Republican Party was saying back in the 60s. It's what they were saying back in the 60s. Back in the 50s, mind you, with Everett Dirksen saying $1 billion here, $1 billion there. Pretty soon you're talking about real money. And we're creating this deficit upon deficit upon deficit. And it's been going on, And the Republican Party was the only one who was sitting there talking against that.
You know what's funny?
And that was those younger people. When I was one of the younger people, and we felt like revolutionaries because we were going to turn the tide of what the Democrats had been doing. And what happened? The Democrats just kept rolling. The Republicans joined the Democrats, and the Democrats joined the Republicans. finally we have got a president who sits there and says enough is enough.
I want to say one quick thing. Stafford, often you make generic categorizations that you have. Obviously, you have not been listening to this show or to any other show. We have been talking for years about these kinds of things. We have not been in favor of many of those things going on. There just weren't enough of us to talk about having fiscal sanity and responsibility. That's the problem. So you're painting with quite a broad brush.
Both of you just sat there and attacked Bob Corker. Both of you. And he's the only. Hey, let me finish my point. He is the only person up there who said we don't want to pass this because it's going to add to the deficit. So don't sit up on your high horse and tell me that you care about deficits when he's the only one fighting the increase with this tax.
Hell, a deficit is. He sat there over and over and over and voted for every bit of that stuff.
Absolutely, Warren.
Do you agree or not that
you can have your opinion, Stafford, but you cannot have the facts.
You do not agree because you do not agree with facts. Go back and look at what happened with Reagan. Go back and look at what happened when John Kennedy came in there. I suppose that's just, like you said, that's just conspiracy theory that never happened.
Never said that.
All right,
but
guys.
It did happen.
Topic number 2 coming up. It's 7:27. Winging It Wednesday, 232-1542. Acadiana's Morning News. We're back winging it Wednesday. All right, Rob has the day off. Derek Albert is sitting in, and my man has question 2 ready to go for the panelists.
We're having a great time here winging Wednesday. Our next topic is what we're calling the Uranium One deal. This apparently is an investigation that has been opened up by House Republican committees talking about the FBI handling of the Clinton case as well as what went on during the Obama administration with this uranium deal, the international uranium deal that has kicked off some mass controversial topics. Stafford, let's start with you. What have you heard on it, and where do you think this is in? Is this a moot point because it happened in the past, or will somebody, face prosecution for it?
Potentially. So all the data I've been able to find on it so far was that there were some accusations made in a movie about the Clintons taking money in a quid pro quo deal. That movie was made by somebody who works at Breitbart, so I'm comfortable personally taking that whole movie and throwing it out and saying that it doesn't have any integrity. That being said, if there is any provable link that the Clinton Foundation took money to influence the decision making of Hillary Clinton, I hope they find a way to prosecute her and they hold her to the same standards that the rest of society is held to. I think that this is more of an investigation into Comey and the way that he's handled things out of a little bit of frustration. And, what we found is if any other citizen would have done what Hillary Clinton did with the emails, they probably would have been prosecuted or at least had their clearances stripped. Mm-hmm. And then we find out that Jared Kushner has done the same thing. And you just sit there and go, all right, guys, when are we going to hold people to the same standards that we'd hold ourselves to? And I don't know that we're interested in doing it. I think that again, we've become so divided on partisan lines that, if it's a Democrat, we're going to find a way to prosecute him. If it's a Republican, we might let them skip through, which ultimate irony and all that is Jared Kushner's not a Republican. He's a Democrat. So I hope that if somebody's guilty, they find him and they get him. And that's it.
Warren, do you think this is something that the House Republican Committee should be looking into? I mean, we obviously have some big issues in national politics. This uranium deal, is it something we should be talking about?
This uranium deal is absolutely huge. And I said this back when they first started coming up with this cockamamie story about the Russian collusion with the Trump administration and all that, and they wanted to have hearings. I said, I'm perfectly fine with having the hearings, but if you do, let's don't have a narrowly focused hearing. Let's bring in everything. Let's look at everything. Let's look at our things that we have done to try to thwart the Soviet Union in the last 30 years and with the last 20 years with Russia. Let's look at what they have done with us. Let's look at who was involved, what happened. Let's look at it all. And so in doing that, then let's turn around and look at this deal with the uranium. That's been known for quite some time. 20% of the American uranium was sold to Russia, which was supposed to be totally against the law. And that when you look at that what has happened, I think that's what brought about this Russian collusion on the election, was to try to deflect things from ever having this come up, because they knew if they got that one going, then it would be kind of hard to bring in something else. And that is why that they set that thing up to be so narrowly focused that the only thing it was going to investigate was the election collusion, or allegedly collusion. But if you look at what Hillary Clinton did as Secretary of State, the quid pro quo, the pay for play, over and over and over. I mean, anybody else would have been in prison, and I think it is time to start weeding out some of this massive corruption. $140 million just from that one outfit alone to them.
Carol, where do you stand on this one?
Well, let me tell you, a year ago, Brett Baer's special report had as much of the information as he could find, and and now it has all been borne out to be true. Now, you may not trust Breitbart News, but would you trust the Washington Post that last night revealed that the Clinton camp and the DNC funded what became known as the Trump-Russia dossier? And here's what it means. That's what the article says. It goes right through. Now, they did their little tap dancing here and there. Maybe it was started by a Republican, maybe this, maybe the other. But the final takeaway was, yes, they did. They funded the dossier through Fusion GPS, which is nothing but a Democrat hit group to do opposition research. Yes, there was 140-some million paid to the Clinton Foundation by major Russian donors. Yes, Bill Clinton got outrageous speaking fees. This is while Obama is president. This is while Eric Holder is in the Justice Department. And who was the head of the FBI? Well, none other than Robert Mueller. So he knows, because that gentleman, the informant that was planted inside this whole thing by the FBI, had to sign a non-disclosure agreement. They are trying to get that thing lifted now because he can blow the lid off the whole thing. They're negotiating right now. Victoria Tensing is his attorney. She is no lightweight. She's been fighting the Clintons for years, and she knows how deeply corrupt they are. And so they're getting to it. And by the way, Stafford, Kushner, Democrat, but that was part of a campaign. He is certainly was not in the government at the time when he was talking to anybody. And by the way, Veselnitskaya, who is at the center of all this, it all has to do with the Russians wanting the sanctions lifted after the Magnitsky Act.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for sticking to the time. We got topic 3. It'll be on the way this morning. Winging It Wednesday. If you're calling, have a little patience. I'll put you on hold for just a minute because we like to let our panelists get into it. And then if you want to call, you're going to hear us in the background, but we'll put you on hold a little bit, okay? I'm done to double check traffic for you at this time. Oh, well, darn. Shmemettery at Detente Road, that one being back on the screen. So watch Shmemettery at Detente Road. Traffic brought to you by the Wash. Wash It Up Wednesday. Bernie has got to go there today. Take your car to the Wash, the shiniest place to make your vehicle sparkle, the Wash on Ambassador Caffrey. It's 1212 Ambassador Caffrey, right next to Service Chevrolet. Acadiana's Morning News. We're back with Winging It Wednesday, topic 3.
Okay, guys, back with Winging It Wednesday, topic 3. Harvey Weinstein comes up in conversation again today. Of course, there's more accusers coming out even as we speak. We're seeing national news report on it, but apparently within New York, it looks like DA is investigating for possible civil rights violations. This is yet another layer to this story. Where do we see this ending? Do we, obviously they've attacked the Weinstein Company. Where are we at on this, Warren?
Where do we see it ending? It will never end because it's as old as the earth itself, or mankind itself, I guess. But the one thing I do agree with is that Harvey Weinstein is a despicable human being, even though that I think he's pretty well representative of most of the moguls in Hollywood that have been there since Hollywood was invented. And I just saw something the other day, and I haven't seen it debunked, but some gal who worked at a Robert De Niro restaurant and bar said that Harvey Weinstein used to use that as his meeting place a lot and bring the gals in there, and said you could just sit there and just see, and then they would leave and go back to like a little private apartment they had or whatever, and said then they would come back after some minutes or an hour or whatever, and so you just see the demeanor on most of those gals' faces that just, that things weren't right. And Robert De Niro was a big buddy of Harvey Weinstein. All these people, now they're just upset that Harvey was such a bad actor, such a bad character. When when it's more. I think it's more the norm than it is the exception. You know, I mean, and it's sad. It's really sad to see that how that the press and everybody else, everybody involved in that whole despicable group out there, has done nothing but cover up that kind of stuff. That's why I don't watch any movies. Stafford alleged to the Breitbart movie. You know, I don't watch any of that. I've got more respect for the porn stars than I do the mainstream actors in Hollywood, because the porn stars at least don't hide. They are what they are. They don't run around telling the rest of the world that you know all the problems in the world are your fault. If you would just do what I tell you to do, not what I show you, but what I tell you to do. But so anyway, I hate Hollywood.
All right,
Carol, where do we
I don't
stand?
hate Hollywood. I still go to movies. Some of them produced by Harvey Weinstein. Not the porno ones. But, getting back to this. Now, listen, this New York DA, like many New York DAs, are always like to make a name for themselves. They love those headlines, and boy, going after Harvey Weinstein, how could you make it worse? Well, go after him on civil rights violations. I didn't know we had affirmative action on rape and sexual assault or quotas. But, this is crazy. It's for gender discrimination. It's for anything else they can hoover in against Harvey Weinstein, because now we're just so offended. We look the other way for decades. Now we're just so offended. And so now that the cat is out of the bag, so to speak, here we are all going to make it right. We're going to go after Harvey, and we're going to make sure that he pays for all of his transgressions. The hypocrisy is more enough of that to go around. Harvey Weinstein's a pig, as I've said before. There is no getting around it. He's a pig. Do whatever you have to do. He's probably going to abscond and find a villa with Roman Polanski over in Europe somewhere, I'm sure. What else can you say about this guy? I mean, it's just...
All right.
Disgusting.
Stafford, what do you think about the whole investigation into it, civil rights violations? What's going on here?
I hope that the victims of Harvey Weinstein can find some peace.
Yeah,
absolutely.
In the prosecutors being able to stand up and hopefully put him in jail where he belongs. As a father, you try to raise daughters who are strong enough because predators are going to be out. You can't protect your kids at all times. And I have a son as well, and you try to teach them that there are more important things than your nature. And I'm not saying that boys' natures is predatory, but what I'm saying is that you try to teach that you need to have some control over yourself.
Absolutely. And as a father of a daughter myself, I tell Julie all the time that, when it comes to, she's only in the first grade, but we've already said the word boyfriends.
Yeah.
You need to be treated with respect.
Yeah.
And that's why Daddy says no boyfriends.
And so I hope...
No boyfriends.
At this time.
Yeah.
or maybe ever.
Yeah, I'm good with them.
So I hope, and look, one of the benefits of this Me Too campaign is that it's brought so much of what has happened to light that it's made guys who may have not seen this or been willing to be honest with themselves enough to know that it's out there, face some ugly truths. And I think that's been good for society. And I hope that we learn a lesson collectively and we start holding people more accountable. So I'll go back to what I said. I hope that the victims can find some peace in this, because at the end of the day, we can say whatever we want about Hollywood, but women were raped. And he did some pretty terrible things. And he wasn't the only one. There have been other directors as well. And I hope that some of their male counterparts who were good people are less likely to keep their mouths shut. So that's where I stand.
All right.
Absolutely.
Anybody had a quick thought here?
Yeah, this thing keeps coming up about the males need to learn and this, that, and that. Males have known for a long, long time that there were certain things that you're allowed to do and certain things you're not. And the one that, raping and abusing women and all that is I don't know of anybody who's looked at that as a sport. But those people are dealt with. I think one of the things that we're overlooking too.
You would hope to God they are,
but
I'll
that's
be
a
honest.
problem. We don't see them dealt with enough.
Warren, you and I maybe come from an era that there were more cultural.
There are more cultural, but let me tell you something.
Mm-hmm.
Premarital sex is on the decline. It has been for quite some time, and that I think that kids today actually are better than they were in my generation. And that.
Wow,
you got these bad apples, but they need to be dealt with. They need to be dealt with. But 30, 40, 50 years ago, this Harvey Weinstein wouldn't even made the front page.
Yeah.
It shows how far we've gone in the right direction.
Yeah. And that's part of the problem is that a lot of these people went under the radar.
Yeah.
They didn't go under the radar. Hell, it just that nobody wanted to pick it up and go with it. It was just like it was the accepted thing.
Well, and it really wasn't as rampant, I don't think, back then. I mean, I think there were more more cultural restraints on men and women, both sides, more cultural restraints that people wouldn't cross those barriers of good behavior, etc.
Maybe.
You have a larger society now that is a lot more permissive and that sort of thing. So I think there probably are more transgressions.
And then I do think too is a lot of it comes in with your stars, your athletes, and all that stuff, where gang rapes and all that were and are accepted as a norm. And it's kind of like that old thing. Well, by God, you shouldn't have gone into that dorm if you didn't know what was going to happen to you.
Be very, very careful with victim blaming here, Warren. Be very careful with victim blaming. You can't sit there and say that. I'm not victim blaming.
I'm saying that's what society did was blame those women.
Right. Yeah.
That's what my point is.
Society previously is. Yeah. That's what he was trying to say.
And that's why that they were able to get by with that type of behavior so long.
Mm-hmm.
And still are.
Yep. Coming up now on 7:49.
Hey, it's biblical, Susanna and the elders, right?
All right, 7:49. We're going to Wednesday continues.
Shouldn't have looked.
Final topic on the way. Time for our final topic for Winging It Wednesday this morning. All right, so what is our final topic? I lost my feed of topics, right?
Buyback.
We're seeing the DEA is the national DEA is looking into Take Back Day for prescriptions this weekend. We have quite a few different local municipalities taking part in this, and we actually have some headlines on that later on. But Drug Take Back Day, Saturday, October 28th. Apparently a safe way to dispose of any unused or expired medications. Do you all see this helping out as far as what we're looking at, an opioid epidemic, not only in our state, but throughout the country? Is this something that people should take part in? Why or why not? Let's start with Stafford.
Yes. So we have 150 people die every day from opioid overdoses. It's basically our own 9/11 every 19 days. More people die from opioid overdoses than people died from HIV and AIDS during the height of the AIDS crisis. This is something that is very serious. And if you don't know much about opioids, I'll tell you, they're heroin. They're heroin in a pill form. And we've gotten very lax. We wrote some laws that kind of tied the strings of the DEA's hands to be able to go after people for this stuff. And fortunately, it looks like those laws are getting ready to get overturned. The guy who wrote that law was picked to be drug czar, and recently withdrew his name from contention once the news 60 Minute story came out that he had hindered the DEA's ability to fight the opioid addiction. His head assistant became the chief lobbyist for the industry. So there's a lot of corruption in the federal government when it comes to opioids. And I can tell you that kind of this stuff has touched my family and it's touched my friends, and it's very tough to think about because heroin. Look, I'm 36. When I was 18, you didn't see heroin anywhere. It wasn't here. And now heroin is cheaper than the pills.
Absolutely.
So these kids are getting addicted to the pills, and they're turning to heroin. And so it's scary, and I hope that we do something about it as a society.
And, as the national epidemic continues to grow, what we're seeing is a trend that suburban communities are now the hotspot for heroin use and for drugs like this. Warren, opioid epidemic, this drug take-back day, how do you see it playing together in our communities?
Why is heroin so cheap today?
Good question.
You know why there wasn't any heroin back a few years ago? Because your main heroin-producing centers were shut down.
Mm-hmm.
The number one center for producing heroin was Afghanistan.
Yeah, poppy
when
fields.
the Taliban came to power, they said that is un-Islamic, and if you're growing poppies, then the penalty for that is death. And so all at once that heroin just about that was hitting the world market just about became non-existent, and the price was sky high. Now I saw a thing on television. This was 3, 4, 5 years ago. It said that heroin, that a lot of the kids who were smoking crack and stuff are now switching to heroin because it's cheaper than crack.
Mm-hmm.
And that when we invaded Afghanistan, we turned around then and the Taliban them relaxed their deal and said, we got to pay for this war, so we're going to just turn a blind eye to the poppy epidemic. And who was one of the main poppy farmers over there? Was our man Karzai, who was the president of Afghanistan, the puppet president that we put in place. His brother was growing poppies, one of the biggest drug czars over there, and come to find out, he was being paid $4.5 million a year by the Central Intelligence Agency of the United States.
No.
And they admitted to that.
No, they wouldn't do that.
And they admitted to that. And so, and that's what is. And that I think 75% of all the opioids prescribed are prescribed in the United States. And you're right about the lobbyists and all that.
Yeah.
Look at Billy Tozan. Mm-hmm. He was a good Democrat congressman, and then he switched to being a Republican when it looked like that was. So now, what does he do? He turned around and starts lobbying. Well, he left his office and started lobbying for the pharmaceuticals. After he passed got that pharmaceutical thing passed that said that the pharmaceuticals got retail price for every drug that they're sold through Medicare and all that.
Carol?
Yeah, he's retired from Big Pharma now, I believe, semi-retired or totally retired. But anyway, that 60 Minutes piece was really instructive, I think, and really blew the lid off of Marino. And actually, Marsha Blackburn was the co-author of that legislation that really opened the spigot. I think the CDC says there were more than 64,000 drug overdose deaths in 2016 due to opioid overdoses. This is a really terrible thing, and many families are affected by this, including mine. And I'm so glad they're doing this buyback because there are no really good ways to dispose of these drugs. You can't put them into the sewer system. You can't.
Yeah, they tell you don't throw them
out. Don't put them down
the
spigot, down the sink or anything like that. It's really, really awful, and it's really difficult. People who have bags of these things up in their closet waiting to dispose of them.
And unfortunately, what a lot of people do is take that to the black market.
They're selling it on the black because now they can sell those pills. And a lot of young kids are getting their parents' prescriptions. If they don't use the whole prescription, boy, they're taking them out and they're selling them pill by pill and making a lot of money. Well, the 4 buybacks in Lafayette Parish, in case anybody's interested, Louisiana State Police up on the Evangeline Thruway is it Gloria Switch or Pont de Mouton?
I believe it's Pont de Mouton.
Pont de Mouton. Yeah, right. It's the Thruway at Pont de Mouton. And then the Lafayette Parish Sheriff's Office, their annex on West Willow. And in Broussard on St. Nazaire, I think it's a Walgreens pharmacy there.
It is.
And in Scott, it's a Cashway pharmacy. So people, there are a number of places. In St. Martin Parish, they've got a location as well that I saw. So I would say let's do it. Let's get these drugs.
Clean out them cabinets.
Yes.
And on KPEL965.com, we do have a link to where if you're listening from out of the Acadiana area, all you have to do is click on that link, put in your zip code, and you can find the nearest prescription take-back day in your area.
By your zip code. Okay.
If we have any senators listening to this, state senators, I think it's imperative that you guys strongly consider adding pain management to the list of approved uses for medical marijuana in the state of Louisiana. What we've seen in Colorado is opioid addiction has gone down. We've had a lot of less opioid overdoses in markets where marijuana is available.
I actually heard a big conversation about that yesterday. I learned a lot more about it. I find that fascinating. I do want to look into it a little bit more. 20 seconds.
Yeah, okay.
I want to say one thing that the late Justice Anderson Scalia said one time is that the worst law ever passed in Congress was when they made drugs a federal crime. He said it should have been left up to the states and the localities, and once they did that, they created this huge
bureaucracy,
industry, and it just does not want to go away.
All right, ladies and gentlemen of the Winging It Wednesday panelists, we have Carol Ross and Warren Cottle, Stafford Barnett. Thank y'all for your time this morning.
Thank you.
Great job. Oh, yes, and Rob, my Rob replacement today, he's all by himself. He is Derek Albert.
I want to tell you, you did such a great job.
Derek
he really does.
Derek is a great producer.
I'm blushing over the air.
I said that earlier this morning.
I'm
this
so
guy,
lucky to have him producing, a lot of the stuff
guy
for
works
my show.
no matter what. This guy is like, you know what? I'm going to work on that
Bernie,
story.
I'm going to give you a compliment. You and Rob did a great job over at LAGCO, bringing attention to an industry that is still so critically important.
It is true. Ladies and gentlemen, thank y'all so much. Coming up now on 8 o'clock.